All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Birds on the Farm. I think this is episode 5. We have a ton of fun doing this. As always, my name is Sandy, and this is Kareem. We had those switched for a second there. But we're excited to bring you guys an absolutely loaded slate today. We've got a ton of exciting things to talk about. I think we're just going to get right into it here with a couple of small roster moves the Cardinals have made. So Kareem's excited to tell you about two guys they just acquired, one they claimed, and the other they signed as a minor league free agent. So Kareem, let's get right into that.
Yeah, so first, the Cardinals claimed Roddery Munoz from the Marlins. He's a guy that was in their rotation for a good chunk of the season. He pitched 82 innings, had a 6.53 ERA. The results weren't, what you would want to see.
Yeah.
But I mean, despite the awful results, I think Munoz has the stuff to, pitch better than that. I think the command is going to have to improve, and I also think the Cardinals can unlock more out of his current arsenal with some changes to his pitch mix. His slider, I think, is too good of a pitch to only being thrown 20% of the time. He's also sitting mid 90s with his sinker and four seamer. I think the sinker is clearly better than the four seamer shape. But with a potential velo uptick out of the pen, I think the stuff possibly, could play a lot better. If he's sitting maybe 97 on that fastball instead of 95. The slider, I'm sure, would also improve with velocity, and with the fastball shapes being a little bit better due to the velocity. I think it helps the slider play better as well. So I think Munoz, at the worst, he's going to be a depth arm. It'll be interesting to see what the Cardinals do with him. Is he going to be pitching out of the rotation at Memphis? Is this someone that is going to be pitching out of smaller spurts? Is he going to be a bullpen guy? We'll just have to wait and see what the Cardinals do with him. But I do think he has the talent to be a contributor. He's not there yet. The results, were awful last year or this year. So there's going to have to be changes in there, but I think the stuff is there. And yeah, he's the kind of guy I want to see the Cardinals bet on, a guy that throws hard, has a good breaking pitch. And yeah, it'll be fun to see his development and what the Cardinals end up doing with him. But besides him, the Cardinals also signed Michael Gomez as a minor league free agent. He was a relief pitching prospect in the Rays organization. And despite not being on the 40 man, I think this move is equally, if not more, intriguing to me than the Roddery Munoz one. I think Gomez has a very unique profile due to his very low arm slot that he has. He's got a four seamer that sits around 92 to 93, and he gets a super flat vertical approach angle on the pitch. And that pitch has netted great whiff rates down in the minor leagues. He also has a sinker with elite depth and horizontal break, which can be a really great contact manager, especially against righties. He also has a solid cutter that actually works as his primary pitch. Although I do think the four seamer and sinker are his two best pitches. And he's also got a slider and changeup that he sparingly uses. But I just think he's a great arm to have as depth in AAA. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if we saw him in St. Louis at some point next year.
So with Munoz, let me just ask a couple questions to kind of give Cardinals fans an understanding of how good this guy is. Would you say that you're more intrigued in him than Drew Rom, who the organization just let go? Or I guess they reassigned past waivers, but
I think so. I mean, they're completely different pitchers. You
yeah,
look
it's
at
hard to
Drew
compare
Rom,
them.
he's a guy that mixes
Different.
around his arm slot. Sometimes, he throws from a really low arm slot. The fastball isn't, the velocity that you're going to get out of a guy like Roddery Munoz, but it's still a pitch that, got a decent amount of ride from a low slot. And yeah, I mean, I think Munoz is more interesting than Rom for sure, just given that, he's throwing 95 miles an hour consistently on his heater, maybe out of the pen that, can be closer to the high 90s. The slider, like I said before, I think it's a better pitch than any, pitch that Drew Rom has, frankly. So I think when you're working off that, he's also got a cutter, obviously, sinker, four seamer. I think there's more in the tank for Rodri Munoz to develop into a contributor at the next level.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see with someone like Munoz. There's still a lot of developing to do,
Oh, for
despite him pitching 82 innings last year.
yeah.
So we'll just have to wait and see what the Cardinals do and how they unlock the talent that he has.
Yeah, for sure. And then I know it's hard to compare these guys to people within the system because the profiles are different. But it is nice to be able to say the Cardinals are moving towards guys with interesting upside, with more talent. I think that's the mark of a good organization. And do you feel that way about Gomez as well, especially with some of the relievers that are on their way out, like a Ryan Ludus, for example? Do you feel like Gomez is a more interesting piece than some of these other guys?
I think he's around, that level of guys. I think when the Cardinals are, I think we'll see more moves of, a similar vein to this Michael Gomez one where
Yeah.
they add guys that might be on the fringe of the 40 man or are on the 40 man. I mean, last year, Riley O'Brien was brought in as a minor league free agent. And I know he didn't have the year Cardinals fans were, obviously wanting out of him. He, was injured for a chunk of the season.
Tough for him.
Um, when he got back at the end of the year, he had a rough patch. But I think guys, you want to build a bullpen out of guys that maybe other organizations didn't utilize properly, or guys that you can maximize value. Because I mean, you don't want to have a bullpen, especially when you're a Cardinals team that's trying to limit payroll, or at least we're
Yeah.
going in this direction where we're going to cut some contracts. You don't want to have a super expensive bullpen. So to get interesting guys that aren't going to cost much, I think that's really the direction. And I mean, we saw Ryan Fernandez last year, Rule-5 guy,
He was awesome.
the contributions he was able to make. So you can definitely build a bullpen out of cheaper guys that are on their rookie contracts, or in this case minor league free agents. I think this is really the way to go. I mean, it's not to say you should build your whole bullpen like this, but
Yeah.
I think there's definitely something to be said about taking a chance on guys that aren't going to cost much, but actually present upside to be big league relievers.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say something similar where it felt like last year the Cardinals built their bullpen differently than they have in the past. There was no Andrew Miller signing. There was no last second Greg Holland or Luke Gregerson or Brett Cecil signings. Instead, they went around, they hunted for players with interesting profiles who other organizations had moved on from, and they acquired those guys. And by and large, it worked really, really well. The Cardinals last year had a really strong bullpen. It was one of the best parts of the team. Like you said, that can't be your whole strategy. It's hard to find Ryan Helsley's that way. But I thought it worked really well. And so it's good to see them moving in that direction again this offseason. It feels Heim Bloom esque, which is something obviously we're really excited about. Speaking of building a bullpen, interestingly, the Cardinals have added at least two guys who could contribute to that, to the 40-man roster to protect them from the rule draft. I'm talking, of course, about Tink Hence and Matt Svanson, but we're going to talk about all of those moves. So the Cardinals ended up adding four guys to their 40-man to protect them from Rule-5 draft. Kareem, tell us a little bit about that. Why these guys, and is there anyone else you may have selected?
Well, I mean, Tink Henson, Tekoa Rovi, I mean, they're two of the top prospects in the
Yeah,
organization. There was no way they were not going to be protected. But so, I mean, there's not much to talk about there. I think Tink Hence, we're still looking at more of a 2026 debut. I think next year we're going to have to see him take steps up in terms of recovering from start to start. Maybe there's an outside chance we see him in a bullpen role at the end of the year. But just considering the Cardinals probably not being in a spot to, contend at the end of the year, we'll just see. If they are, maybe you bring Hence up, and because he has a chance to be a really impact pitcher, even in a bullpen role. But I think more than likely 2026, and next year
yeah,
we'll just have to see him take steps up in terms of recovering. Hopefully the velocity is consistent from start to start. Tekoa Roby is a guy we just have to see healthy. He hasn't been healthy his whole career. It feels like even before the Cardinals acquired him, he's just dealt with shoulder problems, which you
poor
don't want to
guy.
see out of a pitcher. But yeah, considering all the injuries he's had, I mean, I think obviously the Cardinals have had guys that have dealt with injuries, whether it be Tink Hens, Cooper Jerpy. But I think if there's one guy that's, you know, maybe getting closer to the point where it might be better to just move him to the bullpen, it's probably Takora Roby. I don't think he's there yet, but it's certainly trending that way. If he's unable to stay healthy pitching out of the rotation, I think it seems like an inevitable transition. So yeah, I just want to see Takora Roby healthy because his stuff plays, and that's not just out of the bullpen, out of the rotation. I think he can be an impact starter. So those are, my thoughts on Henson Roby. But I think the two interesting additions. Firstly, Matt Swanson. He's a guy we've talked about a lot on this podcast. I think he's one of the better relief pitching prospects in the organization. The sinker slider mix is, fantastic. And in the Arizona Fall League, we heard him talk about a cutter that he added this year, which we've
That's
talked
awesome.
about can be, a great pitch for him just due to the nature of him throwing that pitch being in the middle of his two extremes. That be his sinker that gets a ton of run and his slider that gets 10 to 12 inches of sweep. That cutter profiles as a gyro pitch in the middle of those two offerings. So I think that can be great for his profile. Sit as a pitch that can use more usage as against lefties,
Mm.
but we'll just have to see, what the results are like. I think in the Arizona Fall League, he did look better against lefties than what we had seen during the season. So I think that's going to be a point of emphasis that I'll definitely have to, keep a close eye on. As I'm sure he's going to be at AAA to start the 2024 or 2025 season. So yeah, that's Matt Swanson. We've talked about him a lot, but a guy that I don't think we've talked about too much, but I thought was a really good addition, and that's Matt
Oh, yeah.
Koperniak. I had some questions about him being protected just because, the Cardinals have so many left-hand hitting outfielders on the roster right now. It kind of feels like a redundancy having Matt Koperniak on there as well. But I think if Koperniak wasn't protected, he would. I think he would have been picked in the Rule-5 draft, honestly. Swanson, I'm not sure. I thought there was an outside shot that he got protected or that he got picked, but I thought Koperniak, there was probably a high shot if he wasn't added to our 40-man roster that a team would take a chance on him. Koperniak's had a great contact rate throughout his whole career, but he made major improvements over the offseason in terms of adding bat speed.
Mm.
And the power was just a night and day difference from what we had seen previously. Now, do I think this is someone that's going to be an above average power guy at the next level? No, but he went from a guy that probably didn't hit for enough power to even be on a major league roster to someone that's on a 40-man roster right now, and I think we'll see in St. Louis. So that's huge. And I think it's great to see the Cardinals put an emphasis on improving bat speed with a guy like Koperniak who, has the contact that you want to see out of a prospect. The power isn't quite there. You go ahead and put this guy on a bat speed program, and here he is hitting balls 110 miles an hour. I mean, that's awesome to see. And yeah, I'm really interested to see what Koperniak is able to do. He's probably more than likely a bench piece, of fourth, fifth outfielder type, but this is definitely someone I want to see get reps at the major league level. He's probably more of a corner guy than a center fielder. I know some people have thrown around, oh, this guy should be competing for the center field spot. I think he's more of a corner guy. He is a pretty good athlete, but I'm not sure if the actions are, center field esque. Especially what the Cardinals want to get defensively out of that position. When you look at guys like Siani and Victor Scott, he's not going to present that. But I do think Koperniak has the flexibility to maybe play center field in a pinch if you want him there, but not in an everyday capacity. He's more of a corner guy. So yeah, those are, the four guys the Cardinals added. Definitely interesting to see Koperniak out of that group, and I hope he gets some run next year in St. Louis.
Yeah, it's awesome to see these guys moving up. Obviously, we're really excited about them. Like you said, we've talked about Swanson a ton. I do think he'll contribute to the bullpen this year, even if it's not a full season role. Now that he's on the 40 man, it'll be nice for him to be part of that Memphis shuttle. And I think he's more interesting than some of the arms that they had last year. I'd rather have Swanson up here and see what he's got than a guy like Ryan Ludus taking innings. So I think that's a huge win for the Cardinals. Also, like we said before, last year, the Cardinals cobbled together this bullpen, and a lot of people didn't like the individual moves. But when you look at the mosaic of all the moves put together, it was a really great thing. Roycroft on his own is not an interesting signing, right? But when you look at Roycroft, in addition to bringing up like Leahy and John King breaking out a little bit and acquiring Fernandez in the Rule-5, it turns into a really productive unit that was one of the team's greatest strengths. So that's super exciting. Um, just to add in there, really hope Tekoa Roby can get healthy this year. He and Tink Hence, now that they're on the 40 man, they're protected. They're going to be they're part of St. Louis's plans now to contribute very soon. So hopefully they can have a healthy year. But before we get into the mailbag and the rest of these questions here, just a quick word from our sponsors. So 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles is located at 9640 Olive Boulevard in Olivet, Missouri. They're open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday and then 9 to 4 on Saturday. And they buy and sell and trade all types of sports cards and collectibles, Pokemon cards as well. They have the newest selection of packs, boxes, and single cards of local players and stars around the league. So at Dealing the Cards and Birds on the Farm, we really do love 314. They're an incredible sponsor. They have lots of cool stuff. I know Andrew over at Dealing the Cards has become addicted to card collecting in the last few weeks. He's very excited about it. He's always in there checking something else out. So please, if you have time or you're interested, go to 314. Tell him we sent you. Devin owns the place. He's incredible. So yeah, that's awesome. And then also, we're proud to be partnering with Underdog Sports, our favorite place to play fantasy games. You got to check out Pick'ems. It's so easy to play. Just pick 2 to 8 stats of your favorite players and choose whether they'll go higher or lower. You can multiply your money by 20 by going 5 for 5. Sounds fun? Well, sign up with promo code CARDS to claim your first free pick and your first time deposit. Offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. We can't wait to see your entries. We love Underdog. It's a ton of fun. Make sure you go on there and play. Pick'ems is awesome. Like we said before, super easy, just higher or lower. So go give that a shot. All right. Thank you very much, Underdog and 314. Now back to our mailbag. So question number 1 for the mailbag portion of this episode comes from Bernie Nicholas. And he asked, now that the Cardinals have added 4 prospects to the 40-man roster, which unprotected players are at high risk of being drafted in the upcoming Rule-5 draft? That's perfect. Perfect segue from our last question. So who do you think, Kareem?
I personally wouldn't anticipate any Cardinals minor leaguers to be selected in the major league
Yeah.
portion of the Rule-5 draft. Obviously, we talked about Matt Koperniak. I thought that if the Cardinals didn't protect him, there was probably a really good shot that a team took him in the draft. But as far as guys that are actually eligible to be taken, I wouldn't anticipate any Cardinals to be selected. I think that Andre Granillo probably presents the highest shot. He's currently my 4th ranked relief pitching prospect in the system. He throws from a really high slot. I think his slider is one of the best breaking balls in the system. He gets a super steep approach angle on that pitch. He has dealt with some struggles against lefties, and I don't think his command is where it needs to be. But I do think this is someone who has the potential to become a reliever in the big leagues sooner rather than later. I think other interesting names who are eligible include, Darlin Saladin is a guy we've talked about on this podcast,
That'd be tough.
had a tremendous season. And Juan Salas, another guy in the lower levels. Both of those guys have fastballs that grade well. Saladin has a super flat vertical approach angle on that pitch, and he commands the pitch well at the top of the zone. And Juan Salas, he gets about 18 inches of induced vertical break, so plus ride. And much like Saladin, it is a higher slot than Saladin, but he still gets a pretty flat approach angle on that pitch as well. But I don't think either of those guys are going to be taken in the Rule 5 draft, just
A big
considering they're
risk to take a
so
guy that young, right?
yeah,
That
they're
develops
so
that
they haven't pitched above high A. And in
very
Juan
well.
Salas's case, he hasn't pitched above A ball. So
Yeah,
if this was next year and we had seen them at Double A, maybe they'd be considered then. But I don't think we've seen them enough against higher competition for them to really have a shot to be taken in the Rule 5. Now, I mean, if a team was to take him, it would be disappointing to see these
yeah,
guys go, but I'm not sure if they'll be able to stay on a big league roster for the whole season. And at that point, you would get them back. So I think a wild card in this, I haven't seen him mentioned anywhere, but Jack Ralston is a guy that had a
interesting. Yeah,
great season at Springfield. Um, he has a very, I don't think the Cardinals have a pitcher with a higher um, slot that that Ralston throws from. It's very unique, very outlier. And obviously teams are trying to get pitchers that have different profiles out of their bullpen. And Jack Ralston presents a completely different kind of profile than most, pitchers you see just due to him throwing so high. Um, it's a fastball that gets that's low to mid 90s, sits about 90, 92, 93. But I think the calling card with Ralston is his splitter. It's a pitch that really emerged as one of the better offerings in the Cardinals organization this year. Um, the profile, it's a gyro moving splitter, and he, due to his super high vertical release, he gets a unbelievably steep approach angle on that pitch, and it's really hard for hitters to pick up. And performed exceptionally at Double A. So maybe a team sees Ralston and think that this is a guy that could give them a different look out of the bullpen.
yeah,
And the splitter being as good as it is, maybe you see what that works like out of a major league bullpen, but probably not. I think the odds of him getting selected are not too high, just because I haven't seen it thrown around anywhere. But I thought he'd be worth talking about here, just due to his profile. I think he's someone that we hadn't seen a lot of before this year. He dealt with a lot of injuries, but this
mm,
was really a breakout season. He's been in the Cardinals organization for a long time now, and he finally was healthy for the whole season, and he really had a breakout. And if
sweet.
he's not taken, I think Ralston's a guy that I want to see, in the Cardinals bullpen sooner rather than later. And hopefully, at AAA, we can see him have a high level of success, because I think the profile is really unique, and I love pitchers with unique profiles.
Yeah, for sure. So just to clarify here, the Rule 5 draft is basically this thing where once a pitcher or a hitter, a minor league player has been in your system long enough, right? They become eligible for the Rule 5 draft. And so that means if you don't protect them by adding them to your 40 man, any team can claim them. And they draft, I believe, in the same order they conduct the rookie draft, right? So the worst team gets to pick first, blah, blah, blah. And basically, if you take someone from somebody, they have to be on your active roster, your 26 man, all year long. So they have no options. And if you send them back down, the other team can take them off your hand. Like the team you claim them from in the draft can take them off your hands for like half the money you spent to get them, right? Something along those lines in terms of compensation. So it allows for guys to get shots where like if someone is log jammed and deserves a shot and hasn't gotten it yet, it lets another team give them that shot. The Cardinals have had a lot of success with the Rule 5 draft in recent years. Fernandez is a really notable example of that. But yeah, I don't think any of those guys will be picked. I think it's just a lot to commit to have them on your active roster all year long. Like it's hard to take guys in the Rule 5 draft. I remember when Fernandez was picked, some people here were like, yeah, I don't know, maybe he'll be back with Boston by June. Obviously that didn't happen. And he's a linchpin in this bullpen, hopefully for years to come now. But they don't always work out that well. So yeah, whatever the case, very exciting. I hope the Cardinals don't lose anyone to the draft. Because we like these guys and we hope they're up here at some point.
I just have something to add, Sandy. A couple years ago, I wrote about how Fernandez could be an interesting Rule-5 guy on Twitter. And then a year later, the
Absolutely.
Cardinals ended up picking
Yeah, that's
him.
kind of crazy.
But um, be on the lookout. I think I'm going to write about some guys over the coming weeks, potential Rule-5 guys
Let's go.
that not only the Cardinals could select, but just some interesting guys that I think are in this that weren't
Yeah.
protected. So, yeah, maybe the Cardinals can sign one of those guys again.
Oh, yeah. Next question here comes from DeWallet Inspector. Assuming the Cardinals draft 15th in 2025 based on their 2024 finish, who are some interesting prospects to watch from this far out? Oh, man. Kareem is the guy when it comes to predicting Cardinals draft picks, but this is really far out, and 15th is pretty tough to predict.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't fully delved into the 2025 class, but one guy that I'm, keeping a close eye on is Florida State left-hand pitcher Jamie Arnold. He's an athletic, low slot lefty who averages 94 on his fastball. He throws from a 4.5-foot vertical release, so very low slot, and I think the slot is reminiscent of a guy like Cooper Jerpy. I think Arnold's slider is probably his best pitch. It's at 84 miles an hour. He gets 11 inches of horizontal on it, and due to his slot, he has a elite horizontal approach angle on that pitch. I think his changeup is still a work in progress, and I'd also like to see him develop a cutter in a similar vein to a guy like Cooper Jerpy,
Yeah.
just to have a pitch that he can use against righties. But considering the Cardinals have a clear preference for pitchers with low slots in the draft, I think
Yeah.
from this past draft, you look at guys like Nolan Sparks. I
Yes.
completely lost my mind there, but
Oh, you're
Nolan
good.
Sparks comes to mind. A guy that has a very low slot and gets a flat vertical approach angle, one of the flattest approach angles on his fastball in the whole Cardinals organization.
Wow.
So I think it clears when you look at the Cardinals' top prospects, Tink Hence, obviously Quinn Matthews, Cooper Jerpy, all these guys have flat angled fastballs that come from low slots. So I think that's been a clear emphasis in the Cardinals scouting team in terms of drafting pitchers with low slots, and I think Arnold fits that kind of mold the Cardinals have targeted. So he comes to mind. I think there's probably not a high shot that he's available. We'll have to wait and see. I think he's trending towards being picked before where the Cardinals are projected to go. But if he was to be available when the Cardinals pick, I think that this is someone that would be really higher on their board. And
Yeah.
I think he'd be an absolute excellent choice, to be honest.
Sweet. Well, yeah, I mean, I hope the Cardinals draft well again. I feel like the drafting has been really good in recent years, but I guess it's hard to say. I don't know. There's a lot of exciting guys coming up through the system, though. And that leads us into our next question here from Thomas Govin. He asked, which prospect group is better right now, the position players or the pitchers?
I'd say from top to bottom, I think the pitching department is the
I think I would
clear
agree with
strength
you.
in the farm system right now. Although JJ Weatherholt, like I think he's firmly the Cardinals' top prospect right
Yeah.
now. Following him, I have three pitchers ranked right behind him: Quinn Matthews, Tink Hens, Cooper Jerpy, in that next tier. I think Cooper Jerpy is a guy that I'd like to talk about, just because I don't think I don't hear people talk about him as highly as I think he is as a prospect.
He's so
I
good.
think out of those three, I think Jerpy has the highest upside to be a potential top of the rotation starter.
Wow.
His
High pick.
he's got a unique profile stemming from that low arm angle, allowing him to both generate whiffs and limit contact quality. So I think Jerpy's a name to watch. Hopefully, he can stay healthy in 2025 because I think he has a really unique profile, and we've seen him, you know, albeit at the college level, he has shown an ability to pitch innings, which you haven't necessarily seen out of Tink Hen. So We'll just have to see what that looks like in pro ball. We haven't seen that, but
Yeah.
uh, having him with him pitching as many innings as he did at Oregon State,
Mhm.
albeit that was a couple years ago and at the college level, it gives me a little bit more confidence that he could work out as a starter. And if he does, I think he has as high, he's got some of the highest potential, not only in the Cardinals organization, but I think, in minor league baseball to be a potential top of the rotation starter.
Yeah.
So obviously those three at the top, I think the Cardinals probably have one of I don't know if there's a team that I would take their top three pitching prospects more than the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals might have
Wow.
the
High praise.
yeah, I think those top three
They're
are
very
just about as good as any other organizations, I would say. So
Yeah, all
obviously
3
the
of them could earn a spot on the top 100 prospect list.
oh yeah, absolutely.
They
I know
probably
Cooper
deserve to be on
I
there.
know Cooper Jerpy isn't getting that sort of recognition right now
I don't
from
get it.
major outlets, but I do think Cooper Jerpy is a top 100 prospect.
He is so good.
So, I mean, outside of those guys at the top, I mean, you look at a guy like Michael McGreevy. I think he took major
Yeah.
strides this year, pitched well for us at the major league level, and obviously at AAA towards the end of the season. I think
He's
he
good.
could be a potential solid number 5 starter, and I think the opportunity is going to be there where we'll see him a lot next year. So
Yeah.
that should be fun to watch, and see if he can actually put together results in a sample over a full big league season. But besides him, I think Sam Roberza is another guy that deserves more attention. He got injured last year towards the halfway point of the season, but um, I think he's got the makings of being a potential back of the rotation starter. I talked about this on dealing the cards, but I think Roberta is a guy that could probably add a sinker to his arsenal, and I think that's a pitch that could help him take that next level. He
Mm.
does have reverse splits. His four seamer is a gyro shape, doesn't get a ton of horizontal, and similar to a guy like Andre Palante this year, we saw what adding the two seamer to his arsenal did against righties. He was able to find a lot more success. Um, I think Sam Roberta would benefit greatly from adding a two seamer that he can use inside to righties. Now, besides like the starting pitching prospects, I think when we're looking at relief pitching prospects in the system right now, guys like Zach Showalter and Luis Gastelum, I think it's been a while since the Cardinals have had that caliber of relief pitching prospects in their system.
Yeah.
Um, Other guys down the system we've talked about, Darlin Saladin, Juan Salas, a couple of names to throw around. There's not only that, the Cardinals aren't only heavy at the top. I think the system throughout the system, I think they've got a lot of interesting pitching prospects, and
Yeah.
that's the clear strength. I think they're for sure in the top half of the league in terms of pitching prospects, potentially even like inside the top 10. And as I was saying before, I think our top three pitching prospects match with just about any organizations. And yeah, I think you know we'll definitely have to see improvements in terms of position player prospects in the system. Obviously, when you add a guy like JJ Weatherholt, that helps a ton. I think he's going to be a surefire big leaguer and a guy that's going to be a productive guy at the next level. And he has the versatility to play. He's playing shortstop right now, but he can play third, he can play second. So I think when you add a guy like that to the organization, it helps a ton. But the depth of the position player prospects in the organization isn't at its best right now. That's all I'll say. But the pitching prospects are, I think they're in a good place right now in terms of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would agree with you. Looking at the system kind of from the top down, right? It feels like if the Cardinals have problems with their pitching staff, no matter where those problems are, there really are answers within the system. Maybe not short-term answers, but at least long-term answers for guys to fix things. It feels like a lot of these guys will be part of the rotation or the bullpen at some point. On the position player side, I'm just not getting that feeling at the moment, right? Obviously, at catcher, the Cardinals have a surplus of talent. They've been really good at developing catchers lately. Jimmy Crooks, Bernal, even like Sammy Hernandez. Like these guys are exciting players. They'll be fine at catcher. JJ Weatherholt and Thomas Sajazi are outstanding infield prospects. But after that, I don't really know who else is going to contribute in the future in the infield. Obviously, there are names in the system. You have to have guys to play these positions, and there are some exciting guys, but it's hard to project anything from a lot of them. As for the outfield, most of those prospects have already arrived, right? So I think the reason the position players are like as a whole, that unit is struggling is because most of the exciting position players have already arrived in St. Louis, and now they're being supplemented by a second wave of prospects that are mostly pitchers. There are exciting guys like Chase Davis. I'm really excited about. There's a question about him actually, so I'm glad we're going to get to talk about him. But the pitching core I think is a little stronger. All right, question number 4 comes from Derek. He asks, what changes do you expect at the minor league coaching staff level? Will there be a total turnover or will most coaches return? Do you anticipate an increase in the number of coaching staff positions? I'll just real quick, that last question, absolutely. The Cardinals will add staff. They will modernize and they will be more like a contemporary organization, which is really refreshing.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't expect a complete, total turnover, but I do think there will be several changes. I think once the Cardinals finalize their next farm director, I think that's when we'll start to hear about some of the potential hires and possible additions to the coaching staffs.
Wow.
And yeah, I think they're going to add roles that didn't previously exist. So
Thank goodness.
I think once we have the news of the Cardinals, naming a farm director and that becomes public, I think shortly after, I think the farm director is going to be in charge of a lot of that. So we'll start to see some of those moves take place. So yeah.
It's pretty solid. Yeah, I think you said it all right there. Not too much more to add there. There will be changes. I think the Cardinals need to make changes at the minor league level, though, in terms of coaching staff and positions available. So it's very refreshing to see that happening. And moving on to our last question of the episode, this comes from Arenado Stan 28. What does Chase Davis need to improve on to solidify himself as a top 5 prospect in the system and potentially earn an MLB call up?
Yeah, I mean, Davis has all the tools to be a top tier prospect.
Yeah.
I do think he needs to improve his contact quality just to reach his full potential. I thought last year he had stretches where he was the most feared hitter in the Cardinals system, but I didn't think it was consistent enough. I mean, Davis is a guy athletic, has a majestic swing, that gets comped to Carlos Gonzalez. He possesses raw power, has great swing decisions. The contact rates are, not exceptional, but I think they're good enough. But I will say, like last year, this year, he had periods where I felt like he hit too many pulled ground balls or even pop outs, low value batted balls.
Mm.
Now, Davis does excel at pulling the ball in the air when he gets it in the air, but he just doesn't hit the ball, hit fly balls enough to project as a 30 plus home run guy
Yeah.
that Cardinals fans really dreamed of following the draft. So
Mm.
I think we'll have to start to see him lift the ball in the air a little more to get to that power if he wants to get national attention and really creep these prospect lists. I think the power itself needs to manifest a little bit more. I thought that in his pro debut, it was really disappointing seeing him not produce any power. I thought he made improvements this year. There were stretches, like I said, where it looked like he was the best prospect in the Cardinals organization, but it's all about consistency. I think he's going to have to get the ball in the air more consistently to get to that power. He does have the raw power, like I said. When he gets it in the air, he does have an ability to hit it to his pull side, which is obviously what you want to do to maximize power. So I think we'll just have to see him be more consistent, and I think a big part of that is just getting the ball in the air more
Mm.
frequently.
Do you still think he could be a 30 homer guy at the big league level someday?
There's a chance. I think more than likely he's probably in the 20s, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a chance. But he's going to have to continue to work, and I think the fly ball rate's going to have to be higher for him to get to that power.
Do you see him compensating for some of that lost power with a higher batting average or a better on base percentage, perhaps more discipline as a hitter?
I don't really project Davis as a guy that's going to hit for a high
Yeah.
BABIP, just because I mean I touched on it a little bit, but he pulls the ball a lot and hits a
Yeah.
decent amount of ground balls, and pulled ground balls have absolutely no value. He pops out a decent amount too. So
Like a
I think
strikeout.
the BABIP as it stands right now, I don't think this is going to be a guy that's going to hit for a super high BABIP, but we'll just have to wait and see. I think next year we'll see him at Double A at the start of the year, which is where he finished this season. But yeah, I think that is something I'm going to be watching. I do think he has the skills to hit for 30 plus home runs, but we'll have to see him lift the ball in the air more consistently to get to that.
Yeah, I'm excited for Chase Davis. I like you said, Kareem. I do think he's somebody that could be a top tier prospect for the Cardinals. But consistency was his biggest enemy last year. You touched on it perfectly. He had these hot stretches where he was just untouchable. It was amazing. And then all of a sudden, it had been 2 weeks since his last homer, and you're like, "Gosh, what is happening here?" It's a little bit like Gorman at the major league level, but not at all. Davis is not that streaky. But yeah, obviously we hope that power can come together, because I think if it does, you see Davis probably 2026. I don't think they'll see him in 2025. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, probably either 2026, 2027 timetable.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's our last question here. This is a super fun format for us. We love answering your questions, viewers. And if you want it to be one of your questions, all you have to do is ask. We would love to answer it. So obviously, we probably can't answer every question we get, but ask us an interesting question. We will try to take it into consideration. We'll try to get you an answer. So make sure next time we do one of these, just comment your questions below this video. You can reach out to either Kareem or I on Twitter as well. Kareem's super active in that space. He does some incredible stuff. And then even if you put some stuff on maybe some of the deal on the card stuff, we can then be able to use that and aggregate from there as well. So thank you guys so much. This was another great episode. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you next time on Birds on the Farm.